a necessity of being in these classrooms. What's the point here? If we look at can do for proficiency, that is an ACTFL rating of intermediate, tells us the student should be able to, the learner should be able to do the following things. How do we then assess that? Well, oral proficiency, it's been for the last now 30 years, plus oral proficiency interviews have done that for us quite nicely, is being able to show in the course of a 15 to 30 to 50-minute interview, depending on the proficiency level of the student, what can the student actually do? Can the student hold up, as it were, speaking in target language X? Unfortunately, it's, as you all know, for those of you who test or conduct oral proficiency interviews or test in this matter, it's extremely time-consuming. It's extremely difficult to be certified to do it correctly. Requires all kinds of upgrades every other year, so forth, to make sure you're doing the right job and so forth. And so, is there an alternative? Especially if we're talking about, I know we have some secondary school teachers, when you're talking about classes upon classes of 30 students plus over the course of a year, how does one get around testing everyone? It's very difficult. And especially then, how do we go about testing all 4 skills? And I'll even say 5 skills if we're including cultural knowledge as well. How do we do this? What do we know the student can do with this stuff that we've tried to get into her head? Portfolios give us at least one reasonable window into all of that. It gives us a chance at least to see what the student in his mind thinks he would present as his ability in the language. And significantly, and I'm going to tie my second tenet that we'll keep going through the day. So one big tenet through the day, proficiency instruction and portfolios go hand in hand. The other biggie is that portfolios and student-centered instruction go hand in hand. One of the biggest benefits that we have found in our now 3 years of using portfolios in the intensive program is very specific to student-centered instruction. Now, what does that mean? Well, a couple of sidebars here. One, we've always been interested in this. I mean, I think all of us sitting in this room know that you look at a class, as I look at you here, I can see no two of you are going to be exactly alike if we were now starting to study Russian in how you approach the language. Some of you have interests in literature, some have interests more in structure of the language, some of you are doing it for comparative reasons, you might know another language, you know the drill. So we've been told now for decades, attend to the different student needs, the different student wants in the classroom. Yes, 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 and we all have tried to do that. We've all handed around little cards at the beginning of every course. So tell us why you're studying Arabic. Tell us why you're studying Spanish. Tell us, because we want to know, because I'm going to attend to your every need. No one's laughing, but you should be, or at least inside you're dying quietly. And we know what then happens. We get cards that say, my parents are Russian, so I need to learn Russian. I want to travel. I want to read War and Peace. I want to. And they're all different, and as we try in a classroom of now, for us at University of Texas, 25 students, to attend to all of those different needs in one 50-minute, or in the best case scenario, 75-minute class, is extremely difficult, as you know. It's extremely difficult. So, try as we can, and we do our best in the classroom to do that, to attend to all these different learning styles, to attend to all these different reasons that every student is in our classroom, to attend to every different way that students learn. I'm a visual learner. I'm a psychotic learner. I like to learn with pictures. I like to learn with numbers. I don't like to learn, right? We're dealing with all types. What's the second best thing we can do to attend to them? Again, the portfolio allows the student to focus on precisely the kind of material, the modality of the material. Does the student want to look at videos, want to listen to recordings, want to draw pictures? How does a student want to approach her own language learning? It's a great way to do this. Okay, so those are my two big tenets, the proficiency one and student-centered. That's where I'm going to kind of start with here. I also want to talk about the notion, this kind of ties in the two, that portfolios will allow us to look very simply, easily, at self-leveling tasks for the student. Again, what do I mean here? I'm using a little bit of jargon. Within my classroom of 25, especially at level 0, first year intensive X, in my case Russian. So I've got my class of 25 students. I've got Among that group, a student who truly has never done a foreign language outside of a bit of Latin in high school. I've got a student who is a second generation heritage speaker, so still hears Russian at home, but doesn't know the grammar at all. I have a student who's already done quite well in Spanish and is also taking first year French and wants a third language. Overachievers. Hate them. Yeah, okay. You know, again, we've got all different levels, even at level 0. We know what these monikers mean, that even when we talk about beginning level Italian, beginning level Dutch. There's even a better one, right? Because Dutch, almost all of them have German. Some of them don't, though. What do? You address it to those who know something about the previous language. It's very, very hard to, again, get into the class and simply come out with the same focus here and go forward, that all the students are going to be at the same level. Portfolios are self-leveling. The student will, with our encouragement, and that's part of what today's all about, will attempt exercise material, will attempt task, will work at stuff that she thinks she can handle. Now, I'm going to throw one more little wrench into how we would say, let's get the students to work on those materials by going back to good old-fashioned Stephen Krashen, good old UT alum here. If we go back to 1980s pedagogy, something real simple, that old-fashioned simple rule that to me still holds water even in these days of proficiency and post-proficiency instruction. Input plus 1 is the way to go, is to get our students used to looking at everything we do. If we can convince our students that, I know you can handle this. I know you can order from a menu. I know you can get a cab. I know you can buy a ticket to the theater. I know you can do that. I want to push you a little further. I want you to buy a ticket to the most in-demand show and argue to get that ticket. I want you to order in a restaurant and be able to change everything up when the waiter says to you, we're out of that. I want you to be able to handle that plus 1, right? Level of difficulty, this is what I can do, and a little bit more. Plus 1. Portfolio, same thing, is to get the student to say, find your comfort level and get out of it. Exceed it. Right? Find a task, get yourself a task that you feel good about doing, and pump it up. The more we get our students encouraging themselves, as it were, to do this, the more quickly they're going to reach the levels of proficiency we're all after. We're all after the same thing. We want them to be able to use the language effectively, efficiently, correctly once they get out of our classrooms. Last point. This is all still the general overview, and then I promise you I'll get to something more interesting than my babbling face here. To talk about the high-level benefits, the benefit of what happens when we allow students to take on material, to take on tasks, right, that they've chosen themselves, that they're interested in. This has proven to be much more interesting to me than I thought it was going to be when I began this experiment about 3.5 years ago. Telling students, your assignment has the following parameters, and I'm going to go over what those parameters are in the second bit here, integrating the portfolios into curriculum. But let's say I'm going to give you these parameters. Your portfolio must have A, B, C, D, and E. Otherwise, it's all up to you. I'm not going to tell you, you must include this. Your material must have this. It needs to look like this. I'm pretty much telling the student, go and find what it is that you're interested in. Fascinating thing. The students did this. They actually went and they brought back, and I will show you some examples, they brought back portfolios that included things that interested them. And these were not things that I would ever think, A, to put in a textbook, or B, to bring up in class, ever. Everything from, true examples I'm going to give here, dog raising, one man, one person sailing, ice fishing, okay, are you ready? Bear wrestling. All of these are actual topics that were brought up as subject matter for portfolios in the last couple of years. I could keep going, guys. They're as weird in a good way as Austin is. We believe in keeping Austin weird, and now I now feel much more rewarded and warmed that Austin is weirder than I thought it was. Yay! So our students really do, I shouldn't have been that surprised, they're diverse. They're different, they're individuals, and they do bring their own interest to class. Now, as I said, I would never have thought of bringing these topics. I mean, I write bloody textbooks. Some of you I know here also do in your languages. So I'm constant. I think back and I kind of want to kick myself now that I've had this experience. I want to go back and rewrite all the stuff I've done already. Because I think, what did we talk about, right? Chapters 1, 2, 3. Yourself, your school, your study. Because we say, well, this is the first thing you're going to talk about because that's where you are. So you have to be able to say a little bit about yourself. You have to say a little bit about the school you're in, what you're doing in school. Well, I mean, I don't want to give that up. I want my students still to be able to do this, but I now realize, what did we put out as ancillary themes? And I love this one because until a couple of years ago, what was the first ones for Russian that would be our ancillary themes? Theater, ballet, all high culture, right? Everyone's there. Can you hear big C culture, right? Because this is what you do in Russian, right? Russian ballet, Tchaikovsky, right? Swan Lake. We're going to do all this. So, and of course, our students are going, I've never been to a theater in my life. I have no idea what you're talking about here. And I realize that I'm completely lecturing to myself, basically, in class. So now, would I have ever thought to have brought bear wrestling into my first year classroom? Probably not, I have to admit. But that doesn't mean that I think it's an inappropriate topic for first year if the student can pitch that level, right? That's one thing proficiency movement has taught us. We can talk about or write about or listen about just about anything, just at level. You can listen about the conflict in the Chechen Republic at a 1 level, and you'll get something from it, a 0+ level, and you'll get something from it. Not a lot, but as the level increases, you'll get more out of it. That's the point of proficiency instruction. All that said, it's interesting to me and simultaneously interesting, and I was terribly feeling somewhat put down by it, almost as though, why didn't I think of this before in my 50+ years of life? That of course, students are going to be more interested in the topics that they're interested in their regular life when we create these alternate egos for them in our classrooms, right? Why do we need to reinvent our classroom personas and create little mini-me's in our classroom? That is to have students only talk about what I decided needed to be in the book, or someone else decided to be in the book. So that's all the kind of background that we need to get into this mess. Portfolios allow us, in a sense, to break. For me as a faculty member, I feel so much more emboldened to talk to my students individually when they come in for office hours, having looked at their portfolios. It's getting a little window into who they are. It's really kind of cool to be able, without violating any FERPA laws, to know that your student has this strange interest in bear wrestling and where did this come from? Or that she, as it turned out, practices with her father ice fishing in Minnesota every winter over Christmas break. Wouldn't have known all this. It's kind of a great way not only for us to get to know the students, but to get a sense to be able to talk about it to our students about things other than the ballet, the theater, in our language classrooms. Okay, let me talk now about getting these portfolios into our curriculum. So I will re-emphasize quickly, and then I'll pop up on the screen some examples here of what I mean by the whole can-do orientation. So I re-emphasize that if indeed the point of what we're trying to do in a classroom that's proficiency-oriented is, I need you, students, to be able to do the following things. You must be able to introduce yourself. You must be able to talk about yourself. You need to be able to talk about what you do at a university. So more autobiography, a little bit about goals. I need you, yes, I'm going to plunk you down in country, and I need you to survive. So what do you have to do to survive? You need to buy food. You need to be able to, higher levels we get. I love it when students start saying, but what if? And I love the what ifs because right away we say, you're at a 0+, or you're at a 1, and you're giving a what if that's at a 2+, right? That classic, what? Okay, I know that in Russia we're going to get our own room and everything, but what if I need to do my laundry and I don't know how to wash things in a basin and all? How do I, well, guess what? Proficiency will moves us up. More what-ifs and more can-dos as your level improves. Portfolios, by the way, will help push that up because all the student is going to be doing is demonstrating what he or she can do in the language through the portfolio. So what does this look like? Let me give a sense here. A little bit of clumsiness here while I log on. All of my instruction for my 2 sections was on the Blackboard site here at the University of Texas. I know a lot of you use Blackboard already. Get to intensive Russian. So this is the page set up for our intensive Russian class that was back in 2011. And under assignments is where I keep their portfolio activities. So you've got actually this that screenshot on the second page of your handout. You can look at it up here for now. And as I said, I apologize. Some of it's going to be because the target language here is Russian. For those of you who don't know Russian, I can't believe you can see English in most of this because this is at the beginning level. But I'll gloss everything, not to worry. Let me talk a little bit about integrating portfolios now into a curriculum, as we've tried to do here. And Nick this afternoon will talk about it very, I would say, ideologically similar, his reasoning to do it similar, but his execution quite different. So you're going to get a couple of different models here of how you might be able to do this in your own schools with your own students and so forth. I've already talked about the can-do orientation, but what I want to talk also now about for a minute, to get your mind is, since we're all professionals in the field here, is one of the areas where I think we may have been a little wrong-headed. I won't go so far as to say we've been completely mistaken because I don't want to give up the thing I want to talk about, homework, but I think we've been a little bit funny about it. So much of what we've done, and I certainly know this is the case of my own instruction, back in the 1970s when I was learning Russian for the first time, homework was essential. We knew that. We need more time on task. We need to focus the students' work outside of class on language material. But I think back on how many hours I spent on homework that was incredibly unproductive for me. It was incredibly mechanical or incredibly repetitive in a way that wasn't memorably repetitive, right? So, okay, I fill in the blank, add the ending. Russian, like Latin, has all these declensions on the end, so adding, ending. That classic exercise that you've done language with this. Here's a bunch of nouns, put them in the plural. Here's another list of nouns, put them in the genitive case. Make them possessive. Do this, do that, right? So again, it sounds like we're saying can do. I can put the nouns in the plural, right? And you can see right away where that's not an actual task that we do that often. We realize now in the 1980s and 90s, contextualize, right? Have the students do the exercises in at least a sentence, if not a paragraph, and already we're better. Nonetheless, if I took within my own group of Russian teachers at UT a sampling of the homework, and again, this is using the book that I worked on. So they're using the textbook that I know very, very well. I see the homework that's coming from the bloody workbook, and I see what the students are doing on it. I realize that they've been doing about 70% of their homework mindlessly, unengaged, completely distanced from any kind of communicative activity. That hurts. When I want to be able to switch them over to, no, I want you to do something where you not only understand the reason I've asked you to do this, but you see what it's going to give you after you finish doing it. You have a product. You've got something to show. So that's what I've written here is that homework as productive, not reproductive. I had to spell reproductive with a hyphen, otherwise it started to sound, well, you get the idea. Yes, ma'am, go for it.
Thomas, I'm sorry, I might have a dumb question.
No, please.
At the beginning of the school year, whether it's high school or college
Yes.
or whatever, and you're asking a student to begin a portfolio, is it an actual audio file they're starting? Is it something online that they're starting? What does the initial actual product look like so that we start building upon that?
I will absolutely I will show you examples that I've gotten in the last couple of years. It's everything you said. Because to me, part of the joy of the portfolio, as much as the material that's going to be included in them is individualized to the student's interest, the form of it will be too. So you will get portfolios that look like a portfolio. It looks like a notebook, and it will have stuff in it. Mind you, this one, and I'm going to show all this during break and so forth, includes within it an audio file on CD. It includes a website. I'm going to show some of this in a minute. So this student has chosen to multimedia present her portfolio. And truth be told, I have yet to find a single, but my students continue to surprise me, let me put it that way, with the ways they come up with presenting portfolios. So in short, I've had portfolios presented as simple notebooks. I've had them presented as, another one you're going to see, a scrapbook. Looks like something you would see on the, what is it, the HGTV channel, kind of something really fancy schmancy that someone's put together with lots of color, lots of cutouts and so forth. That's, in my view, way too much. Well, I'll give you my criticism of that one. Websites set up, flash drives presented to me, and others that have been videotaped presentations that they've given as their way of presenting. So kind of like I'm doing to you now, presenting their portfolio in this fashion. Yeah. So it can be all kinds of things. And so the expectation, to get more to your question, which again we'll get to in part 3, specifically to what I tell the student is simply that they will have to do portfolios. Almost full stop. Until we get to, now here's what your portfolio needs to contain, rather than look like. Because by telling them it can be whatever you like, again, I free them up to use their imagination to figure out how it is best to present the material to me. Had just about everything. I'll talk about some of the more unusual bits over the last 3 years of what people have handed in. Okay, so I think I've kind of maybe overspoken about the homework as productive, not reproductive. That is, I want the homework to come out with products. I want the homework to come out with, like our good old can-do exercises with a goal at the end. You've done something when you did your homework. You actually got something out of it. I like to think of the portfolio as being able to reflect what we need to reflect. And I can see some of you maybe getting already a little uneasy thinking, does this mean we relinquish all control as instructors in the class? Absolutely not. The portfolio needs, in my view at least, to contain some layer of teacher-centered item, teacher control, so that there are certain things that I need to be able to see in the portfolio. I need to see. I need to know that at the end of second semester intensive, you can use verbs of motion. I need to know that. How you wish to show me that is more or less up to you, but I'm going to give you a format in which I need you to at least show me how to make a trip, where you went last summer, something like that. So part of it's me, but part of it, in fact, I'd say lion's share needs to be you. You need to tell me what you do well, what you'd like to do, what you'd like to be able to do in Russian, Persian, pick your language, right? And present that in the portfolio. So that's where the mix comes in of teacher-centered and student-centered. And then, important, the portfolio needs to be a significant percentage of the final grade. It can't simply be an ancillary, happy, warm and fuzzy feeling at the end of the course. For the student to take it as seriously as we want them to, it needs to be substantial. My suggestion, what I've done in the past, and again, please, let's talk about this in either questions or now. I think it needs to be a minimum of 20%. I've had it usually first semester because we're doing so much more in the intensive classes, the equivalent of first year Russian, that it's 20%, a fifth of the grade. In second semester, where to me there's even a greater onus on student independent work, it's a quarter of the grade, it's 25%. So the portfolio is a substantial part of the grade. It's not simply 2 points extra credit added on for a good portfolio, which makes it seem like just a fun project. It's not simply a fun project. It's actually part of the curriculum. And I will continue to emphasize and re-emphasize that throughout. Now, the fun bit. Let's look at how to create a portfolio. Let me go back to this now. So if you look at the second, flip over to the second page, or just look on the screen, actually, don't look on. I want to pop up a few of these up. The portfolio activities, let me quickly scroll through so you can see what I'm talking about. These are generated by faculty, by me. In this case, this was the first time I taught the class was I flew solo just to try to see if we could do this at all. The second time we tried it out, Nick Gossett taught a section and I taught a section. We've gone with 2, and starting now next year, every section of our first year of our intro Russian is going to be intensive. We now phased out our usual 2-year sequence of Russian in favor of this intensive 6-hour each semester intensive Russian that fulfills our foreign language requirement of 2 years in one. So we've moved in that direction. So here's what the whole portfolio activities look like. I'm going to just scroll through. You can see lots more. Wait, there's more. This is in one semester. There's a lot. There's more. And finally, we're done. So I wrote 28 activities, of which I'm telling the student he or she must pick a certain number. I'm going to get to that in a minute. To say, from this, look at, there's a certain number of these I need you to be able to do, because these are going to demonstrate the kind of abilities that I need to see you can do in the language. Some of them are me generated. This is kind of still me holding on to that bit of control. But the other half of the portfolio needs to be you generated students. Okay, you must do. Yes, ma'am, please.
They do all 28?
No, they pick and choose. Because again, I'm trying hard as much as I can here not to dictate a curriculum to them, to say, you must do all 28. I'm going to say, here's 28, a menu. Pick 6, let's say. That's what I use for first semester. Pick 6 from this, and then do a minimum of 6 of your own. Not from here. Things that you want to do. And I'm going to talk about what kind of things, because I tell them what kind of things qualify as portfolio entries. Okay? Yeah.
For you, what was the organizing principle in coming up with the...
Great question. Let me pull it back, and in fact, we'll go to the beginning. I'm going to be a bit embarrassed to say, because the textbook. Right?
Well,
the organizing principle for me is a textbook. So I wanted these items to reflect roughly where we were. We start doing the portfolio material in week 3 of the class, because I want my first 2 weeks to be kind of just getting everyone on the same page. We go very quickly, literally this quickly, through the Russian alphabet. We get them into the first bits of greetings and being able to have a little bit of communicative competence at the very, very basic level, 0+ level. But right away, I want them to dive into these. So they, as you can see, in portfolio activities still written in English, but even the actual text is written in Russian. Russian that may be above the level they have at this point. This first one that you see at the top, activity 1, it's the apartment of your dreams. And the form kvartira, they know at this point. They've had the word for apartment. Vash, the word for you, your, they know, but they've never seen it in the genitive case. And michti, dreams, it's in their dreams. They don't have that word yet. So this is already kind of, it's exactly what the portfolio is geared to do. It's input +1, right? It's pushing their level. It's saying, contextualize. So you may not know what this means, but read what's going on here. And notice in the instructions, I give the form dream apartment. So each one of these comes with a website. Let me quickly, if the website gods are good to me, this will work. We used to be able to keep these as hot links, and then they changed Blackboard a bit so that you couldn't embed a link. So I have to do this. There we go. So they take that link out. There we go. It will take them to a real live Russian website. And the students tell me this, and I count on this. This is the shock moment for them, right? And they will tell me, oh my God, Dr. Garza, what were you thinking? Did you know how much Russian is on that? Oh my, I didn't understand any of it. And I go, really? Let's, and we'll call it up in class. Let's play with the first one here. So they look and just go, look at all that Russian. There's so much Russian there. And you start going, it's because it's in Russia. And they speak Russian in Russian. So, and that's the whole, I want them to feel that shock to begin with. Yes? Right? You want them to understand life, that your Russian needs not to be from the textbook. Your Russian, your Italian, your Spanish, your German, your French needs to be in country. It needs to be where you're using it with other native speakers. So, we look at this, I say, now pull back a bit. First of all, it's not entirely Russian. M-hit is not Russian. Well, yeah, big deal, but that doesn't tell us anything. They say, well, .ru, already cultural information. Russian websites are going to end not in .com, but in .ru for Russian. already a good chunk of cultural literacy coming in. Free. Free of charge. And then they quickly go, okay, wait a minute. I do get that first big old word is the word for hi. Russians have what great way of saying hello? Здравствуйте. So, здравствуйте, дорогие друзья. And oh my goodness, okay, I do know a little bit. I see a little bit. And I tell them, go back to the instructions. What do the instructions say? The instructions say, look at the page, look it over. So, what do they see as they look over the page? Well, get this to come up a bit more. The page is a bit cut off, but you have the telephone numbers, so you can see how Russian telephone numbers are written, which is different from the United States. They, again, pick out cognates, territory, pass, okay, I'm hip, they've got that. They go, there's just too much, I don't know these words. And then they'll say, okay, pull out words that you, let your eye kind of scan. What do you see that you recognize? Scan. Credit, company, contact. And they start to pick out, okay, I'm not feeling quite so upset. I can now kind of sort of guess what these might be. And indeed, that's a huge part of the whole point of the work with portfolios, is the student has to go out and start to pick around out there, not in a student-generated little, or I should say, a teacher-generated little worksheet where we know that the student is comfortable, but where the student is purposely uncomfortable for a few minutes, or maybe longer, and get into it. Okay, my instructions said, go to the left-hand side, and you're going to find the word Mebel, and that's their new word. This is going to be the point for me of this thing, is the word for furniture. Now, the textbook material at this point is talking about our hero, and it's a textbook that has a story to it. Our hero is finding his apartment and going into his apartment for the first time, and yes, they're learning all the bits of furniture. So he walks in and says, oh yes, I see there's a table here, and I see chairs over there, good. Oh, I have a television, that's nice. And he's going around naming off what he's got in his apartment to get the students to know the parts of furniture. Sounds good. So right away I say, go in and recognize the different rooms of the house, which they now know. Living room, bedroom, and so forth. And I said, click on one and pick out some furniture for your own. Remember, the name of the exercise is the apartment of your dreams. So, go back to it. We click on it. And again, they're going to look and go, okay, this didn't help me. I still have all these words I don't know, and I tell them, calm down, look around. No, don't know. Oh, wait. Tables, chairs. Okay, I do know a couple of these words. Great, click on one of the words you know. Let's keep you in safe here. Let's go to tables. Click on tables. And they go, please be tables. Look, it's tables. And they're so excited, right? Literally, this is stuff. Now, I'm sure this is going to be true for the school kids too, right? For our kids, this is second nature. Point and click, go to this site, go to that site. The students they live half their lives virtually. And so for them, the idea that you click on a Russian word that means table, and they get a table, is like a huge victory in week 3 of Russian. This is really cool for them. So now suddenly, enthusiasm is way up. Now they're starting to get a little cocky. I can do this. I clicked on table, and I got a table. And so now they're going to go and play around it, because the whole point was pick out furniture you like. So they go shopping, right? Look at all those cool tables. Look at them all. Dining room table. This is so, ooh, I like that one. Okay, and the same, click on the table, right? Find out about it. I told them what they needed to write down, again, using purely this. They don't know numbers. They can't do prices. They don't know this stuff. But I say, pick out the furniture, write down what it's called, and how much it costs, because you're going to make, basically, you have to price out your apartment of your dreams, how much you're going to spend in rubles. This always also is a great cultural shocker for them, when they find out how expensive things are in Russia. So they click and say, I love this one, and they actually will look and say, table, journal. Oh, got it. Журнальный stol. They figure out, know what this is. This is an end table. Got it. And they go over and they see the price. 8,230 rubles. Woohoo, expensive. Very expensive. And they write this down. When they finish out, by the way, it's always fun because they'll finish out their entire apartment, hopefully, to do the portfolio that says you need to pick out at least 2 rooms, 3 rooms of furniture. They pick out all the furniture, and they're going to realize that they've spent somewhere in the neighborhood of about $75,000 to $85,000 to furnish their apartment, which costs them considerably less than that. We hope. So that's kind of. Let me do one more for you to give you a sense of how this all works. You go back to there. Pull this minute. There we go. Let's do food real quick. So same thing. So this one, let me read the entire activity. This one's called, and I give them the word because they're about to get this in the unit, food, yeba, food. For this activity, go to the following website. Explore the various categories of food by clicking on the symbols. Again, you don't need to know all this bizarre food you're going to see there. You just need to recognize the symbols. So what do you mean for dairy products? Oh, you're going to see a milk thing, okay? Write out the words of producti, which they know, groceries, that you already know, and new ones that you're going to figure out from the picture or from the context, and then check yourself using a dictionary. So let's check this one out. Oh, wrong one, sorry. Yep. So I said first year was so great because you could embed the live link in. It was so much easier. Now that makes okay. There it is. Same thing. Russian. The good news is lots of contextualized stuff. So even if you don't know, they know the word for milk. They don't know the word yet for dairy, but now they can recognize it here. The word for milk is that same MLK Indo-European root that we get molok. So in Russian, moloko, milk, moloko. So they get moloko, which becomes molochny produkty, milk products, right? And again, this is that classic. Well, we want a good exercise to do. Sight, sound, the whole package. The way they're going to be learning the language if hopefully they get to the country, right? Is it's not going to be the textbook language in its own isolated frame. It's going to be in the context of living Russian. So there they are. Dairy products, fruit. How's your Russian here? Guess what this one would be. How's your Russian? Baby food, right? Literally children, child food here. Poultry and meat. Yeah. Let's do another. This is a tough one. Coffee, tea, you got it. Okay, so even if you don't know Russian, you know the pictures. Hopefully, you know the pictures. This is a great Pictionary, right? The student sees the picture and starts to hopefully. I love this because the students would confess. They would go immediately to the pictures and then go, I know those words. To say, I bet that's tea or coffee. And they go, tea, coffee. And they in fact pick up a new word, which is a cognate, cacao. So tea, coffee, and cocoa, all in one fell swoop. So in this one, let's go to show what you did. Fruit, dairy, what do we want to look at? We're just picking out a grocery list. Fruit, let's look at fruit. So if they click on fruit, and this also, great cultural information. They panic because at first they go, no more pictures, oh no. And my favorite was students said, wait a minute, I thought it was fruit, but it says mushrooms. Yeah, mushrooms. And then I have fruit, berries, right? Salad, greens, vegetables. And these are all words that they recognize and suddenly feel so much better. And if they're smart, or if they're adventurous, they'll go, oh wait, there are pictures. And there they are. And you've got to love this because again, they'll start to now see words, names of things they don't know, that they're going to start to try to identify and say, okay, we never learned the word yet, or lettuce. Look at that. The word for lettuce in Russian is the same as the word for salad. How cool is that? So they're actually now broadening out their vocabulary by just simply doing the task. And then they go through, and as I said, they fill out their own shopping cart and actually play with it. It's funny because as an instructor, I find it terrifically fun to kind of watch them explore these sites. Now, I'll do the first one or two with them in class just to kind of get them to get the expectation of what is it they're going to see, not to panic. The part of it, as I know a number of you do in classes, teach reading strategies or teach listening strategies so that students don't panic first, right? For our students in particular, by that I mean university students in particular, who are already 18, 19, 20 years old, so many of these strategies are already embedded from their native language, so we need to capitalize on what they already know. So you tell students, when you as a native speaking Spanish, English, whatever your native language is, when you walk into a situation that's new to you, what do? Right? In your own language, right? Let's say you've never been to the opera. So you walk into the opera and you look around and you watch what other people are doing and you see who's saying what and what are they doing? right? Who's going, oh, they're all going over there. What's over there? Ah, the buffets. Ah, food. Good, good. And then you see some people going up. Where are they going? Oh, wait, they've got their tickets. That must be where you see what's going on. Use those exact same strategies, oh student, to enter your new world of Russophone, Hispanophone, Italophone, Francophone, whatever your new language is. And do the same damn thing, right? Go in and look around, explore, see what these sites look like first, and then start clicking. Students love to just start going in and point and click, and they start opening. They have multiple windows, and they realize it's all in Russian. And they go, yes, yes it is, yes it is. Okay, so yes, please, questions, yeah.
Do you have an example for the first semester of activities that involve other modalities besides read to write?
Yes, yes, let me see if I can pull one out. Yes. It's still first semester, let me find a different one for you. Moscow Metro does, but there's one in particular that I love. I love this one. To explore the Moscow Art Theater. This is one of my favorites. So this would be activity 11, would be roughly unit theater, Nick, when theater's 5, 6? 6, unit 6. So they're now in about week 4 of the class, but maybe beginning of 5. So because we move really fast in this. But let me try this one for you. I think this is one that. Yes. So the Moscow Art Theater one, again, a very kind of panicky looking one. It's so impressive. This is one of the greatest classical theaters in the city of Moscow area. So it has, and again, the student now knows most of these words. Some are going to be cognate, so repertory, spectacles, shows. The troupe, truppa, the authors of the spectacles of the plays, right? People of the theater, the kassa, where you buy your tickets, and contacts. So again, really, this one's an easy kind of one to feel, but what's cool about it, let me make sure I've done this a bit. It has a lot of reading, but where is this? I'm not seeing it. You can actually, my fear always is that they notice this up here. I don't tell them, by the way, that, but some of them kind of go, there's an English key, you can change it all. But normally they say, so let me see, I think most of these have visuals that go with them. See if I can find it. Why am I not finding it? There's one, somewhere on here you can actually tour the theater, which is kind of cool. And the task is go behind the scenes and all that. I'm not spotting it here. Let me see if I'm just. That's kind of like, they may actually. It's funny. I haven't looked at this link this semester. They may have just shut off that modality, but they do video modalities as well for news and things like that. Starting at about week 5, 6 actually of the class. So it'll be kind of watches. My favorite one. Let me see if I can find it for you. Is when. The then President Medvedev changed the name of the police to, the militia, here it is, to police. Let me see if this still works. This may not be up anymore, but I'm going to try it. This was cool because it's absolutely, for them, this was current events going on in Moscow, Russia proper. Please be up, please be up. It's reading it. Yes, it's still there. So, again, this now was not, I'm trying to think what exercise that was. 14, so we're right around midterm of first semester. So around week 6 of first semester. What I love is, okay, Medvedev, they recognize the man, they recognize his name. Their shield they'll have decided, past tense. No idea what that means, that big word that means rename. Although the good students know this. Prefix piri means re in English, so it's re something. A smart student will recognize the word for name embedded, but probably not. Militia, police, cognates, no problem. But watch what happens now. This is the fun part.
Должны быть подробным образом определены нормы, которые обеспечивают общественный контроль за деятельностью Министерства внутренних дел и его должностных лиц. На законодательном уровне необходимо утвердить порядок применения милицией различных мер принуждения. Это то, что вызывает очень острую реакцию в обществе, и то, что должно быть очень четко регламентировано.
Okay. I'm watching poor Katya cringe back there. You dig it. So, video, normal rate of speech, the president of the country addressing, really? They've had 6 weeks of Russian. So what's the task? What could we do? This is a good little workshop thing. We can't say, okay, now answer the following questions about the text you just heard. Can't do that. But what can we do? Go for it.
Write down words that they recognize.
Absolutely. So as you listen to it, just pick out this word, that word, a handful of words you recognize. Put them down. See what can you construct any meaning from that. Great. What else? Great. So words you recognize.
And write in English what they understood.
Absolutely.
For listening
Did you kind of get a sense even of, from maybe the intonation, maybe you know the topic of the subject is changing the name of militia to police. Did you pick up any sense of what he's talking about? Absolutely. Pull out the cognates, right? Even for new words that you don't know, but you hear cognates for them as it goes through. What else? There's more. Think cross-culturally. Go for it. Yes, ma'am.
How is this suit different from American suits?
Actually, I like it.
Different.
Exactly, right? The notion of when President Obama addresses the nation, does it look any different? Does it look like this? Does it not look like this? What's the same? What's not the same, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. Get kind of, where are we? Where do you think we are here? Right? Our students aren't used to seeing the president is now about to address the nation, right? And that's what they're seeing here. What is different? When an interesting student right away pointed out, I love this actually, because normally this was such, for me, an interesting cross-culture. The student goes, he doesn't have any Russian flags around him. The president always has flags all around him. And it is a good cultural point, especially since the last decade, we've really seen this much more front and center nationalism. Russia, for all of its nationalistic tendencies here, strangely, this could be his really nice living room. Turns out it isn't the Kremlin, but there it is. Right? I love it too, because at the very end of it, so you pull back slightly into the clip, it pulls back and you do the flags are there. Yeah, they are there.
It's 11 o'clock.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So to answer your question, we do try it. There's audio clips, there are video clips. There's a lot of just visuals, maps. In fact, let me do one last one for you.
Yeah.
Terrific question you asked, actually.
In student productivity also, is it
Written,
mostly, yeah.
written, reading, oral production. Sometimes they have to record something for these activities, absolutely. The only other one I wanted to show you that's very, very different in this respect. Well, this one actually is kind of cool. So that was called the Russian envelope. And that is what a Russian envelope looks like. And the task is to print this out. So they print out the envelope. And our character in the video that goes with the book, through the course of the first 3 weeks, in various clips, has made it very clear where he lives. He's given his street, that we know it's in Moscow. We hope the student knows it's in Moscow. We know Moscow. He gives a street address. And at one point, we see him pull back, and it shows the zip code for them, because he pulls back on the apartment building and shows zip code. We ask him to address the envelope. And of course, what's funny here is they have to first, comprehension that's cultural, is the zip code goes here, the name up here, to who's being addressed to here, and this is where the sender's name goes and address goes. So again, culturally, it's very different from addressing a U.S. envelope. Mind you, the vast majority of our students don't know how to address an envelope, and I know you're saying they don't write letters. I know. So this is kind of like transcultural. It's teaching them how to write in Russian, and then you might give them an American envelope and say, address this to your parent. Write something. Mom will be glad to get some news from home. So yes, lots of different modalities that we want to use for these. Okay, so let me get through some more of these real quick here. Okay, so I've gone through the writing of proficiency-orientated materials. Now, what I've done, by the way, no one's asked this, so let me go back to these and just pop somewhere randomly in the middle. There we go. A little further in the middle. There we go. Okay. Days of the week, Moscow restaurants, dog and cat, it's a pet store. Those are 3 activities. Now, we already got the question, these are driven by what? By the textbook. But the activities themselves are driven by what? Proficiency again. I want them to be, I never want to ask them to do something, because it always ends with, a task. It always ends with produce something. The envelope, right? Produce your list of furniture. The task needs to be governed by the proficiency guidelines. So at this point now, 16, 17, 18, we're again back to around midterm or so forth. I need them now to be sort of moving, I need them to start moving away from the zero now to 0+, and actually pushing into intermediate for the first time. So I want them to be able to start doing things that are a bit more challenging than simply find this information, pull this out. They need to start generating information. So notice what's happening here. Your portfolio tab, pulls out Moscow restaurants, is to scope out the dining possibilities in the city and prepare a plan for your visit. So they now need to do both receptively, look at the material that's out there. Here's a list of Russian restaurants, and decide now what you want. You'll be putting down a wish list of your favorite dishes and trying to make sure that they fall into your budget. So the task may be, we're going to give you 10,000 rubles. Plan your perfect restaurant adventure with your friends. Right, so now you have to do something. Many of the individual restaurants on the site have menu items shown. So flesh out your choices here and spend some quality time enjoying the culinary fare of Russia's capital city. So try to find food that you want to try out. Try to make do something with your language here. So these tasks on the portfolio are driven by the proficiency guidelines at the time. Now, the last two bits on this on how to create them. How do the students, and someone asked this question earlier, so right, what do they do? How do they record their responses? Well, obviously it's going to vary according to the task. In the simplest of cases, write something down. Right? Write down what you see, what you read, what you heard. That's the simplest, very easy. But that doesn't take out the other modalities of talking about it. Record yourself, right? Watch, for example, watch this, or look at this segment on how to order tickets to the theater, which is now done automated in all of Russia's capital cities now. Mercifully, there's no more black market in that respect, so you can actually go and say, I want tickets to this, and if they have them, if they're still available, this is how you get them. And then the task will be record yourself, pick out the show you want to see, and record your question to the salesperson. Do you have any tickets for Hamlet on Tuesday, September 3rd for 7 o'clock? Right? Can you do that? And that would be the product you would turn out. So there are very different kinds of ways of recording, and then how do they then present them? This is the fun part now. So, different ways. Let me go back to the simple one. The real portfolio, right? Literally. So the student in this case, I marked a couple of these. Grab my glasses so I can read them myself. She very much a musician, plays guitar. So one section of her portfolio that she's marked them off with these wonderful little tabs are all songs that she found online, popular Russian songs, right? And she literally just wrote up there, Ruski Piesny, simple Russian, Ruski Piesny, and got names of songs, pulled these off so she has a list of the chords and the words, and then she has submitted this DVD, this audio DVD, that has her performing the songs that are here. So we can watch her now sing. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 songs. 7, 8. Oh, no, that's one set. No, that's new. So 6 songs that she chose to do as part of her portfolio. So the presentation can be all kinds of forms, right? She's printed these out. These are just simply printed offline. So that to me is kind of a 0+ level activity. It didn't take a lot of Russian for her to find those online, a little bit of a fixed phrase. So the actual getting this information, not so much, but the recording of the song, a lot more, especially in terms of phonetics and intonation. I watched the video, listened to the video. You want to hear how well does she do? I don't want to judge her singing, but I want to judge her Russian in the singing. And we're going to talk about that in the last piece here on assessing. So one simple way, and this is still pretty diverse, is just simply a binder of stuff, right, that the student collects over the course of the semester. Another way, a very different one, this is a very creative student of mine, female, looks very fancy, but wait till you see, oh, very fancy. Look at all the glitter. She went the scrapbooking way, right? So this is one of those that initially, I have to admit, as an instructor, I looked at it and said, this is so, it's so much more flash than substance. So I thought as I went through it, okay, Moscow Metro over here. And then you have to look, and this is one of the things as assessment goes, which I'll talk about at the very end. But as assessment goes, you can't just, the instructor can't just sort of say, oh, I see, she just did a scrapbook of stuff she liked. You have to actually need to go through and see, well, wait a minute, no, she wrote up bits and pieces, that's her writing, okay, that's all her. So then you start to see, no, actually she did do. This is one of the exercises from the website. So she did do what I asked her to do. And so in assessment, we will look at things much more critically. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question.
Please.
First of all, thank you, because I'm using the portfolio. I've been using the portfolio practice for 3 years now.
Perfect.
So I am kind of in the same page as you are. And the first year, I actually asked my students to, turn in a binder,
Right.
like you are. And I had students who did the same thing, like we're showing now. But I asked my students also to submit a paper in Italian, because I teach Italian.
Of course.
Basically describing every single item that they included in the portfolio.
Yes.
And so the scrapbook, turned out to be, pictures and everything, and captions, describing why they took the picture and where they were, if it was a trip or anything. And so I was wondering if for that kind of exercise, you are asking the students the same task, or you just rely on the paper.
In the first semester, I really do leave it to the student. I explain to the student, I'll show you in a minute the rubric. The student will have had a rubric. They know what I'm going to be assessing it on. I'll get to that in just a minute. So they know ahead of time, these are the things that Garza is going to be looking for when he reads the portfolio, looks at the portfolio. So they know one of the things there is, there needs to be a very significant quotient of language that they've produced.
Because I did that also in second semester Italian, so their language was kind of limited.
That well?
But yet,
Yeah,
they were able to write the 3 pages in Italian.
Exactly.
And
Well, in second semester, they're going to do, you'll see the rubric is different, and they do a lot more in the language because they're going to be working heavily on reading skills in second semester. And so they actually have to do little reports on their progress on reading. But I'll talk about that in just 2 minutes, I promise.
And my other question,
Please.
sorry, but
No, please.
If you set up from the beginning of the semester the main goals, like, for example, my portfolio said the cultural and the linguistic goals. And the culture is more or less what you have just explained. Right. And the linguistic is, the paper.
Yes, you'll see this is going to be on, if you want to kind of sneak a look ahead of time, I think this is on page 4 of the handout. There's a sample rubric where I'm looking at language, quality of language use, quality of production, difficulty of the task, and level of creativity of the task. That's for first semester. In second semester, that's for reading, more focus on reading. There's a great deal more emphasis now on cultural information because that's the whole point of them looking at the text that they picked out.
Okay.
Yeah, very nice. No, very good. Thank you. Okay, so let me go through. I looked at recordings, revise. So we looked at binders. Yes, I was going to show you some other types. So we went to the regular binders. Let me get rid of those. What can I show you? So I'm going to go from the most maybe simple, those who chose not to do a regular binder, but instead submit a PDF. So they submitted all electronically. So this student, for example, has shown the items in yellow are taken directly from those tasks online. So they've been told in first semester they must submit, their portfolio must contain, because quality of the items is going to vary, obviously, right? Sometimes a small item, sometimes a very large item. But roughly I want them to do 6 items from that list of 28. Pick any 6 from the list of 28. And then any other 6 items they wish to put in, at least 6 items. They can do more if they're creative and so forth and want to earn the full points, they can go above and beyond. So this is one, for example. So here it is, you can see this is still first semester, end of first semester, writing the apartment of my dreams. And so he describes it. Does it have mistakes? Of course it does. He says, so I want a lot of space with long corridors and a lot of character. So a few mistakes here. In the living room, there will be a big TV set and a very nice sofa, right? I'm also going to need, and he adds in, because this is he's saying, I didn't know this word until I looked it up here. I will also need, a lot of dolak. I think he meant Pollock, I think he meant shelves. I meant a lot of shelves. I have a lot of books and movies, he says. I have a lot of books and movies, I need a lot of shelves. I also don't know how much this will be in rubles. So trying again here to use the bits of language he's got. This is exactly the kind of thing we want in terms of the input plus one. He knows what he's able to write in his language, with the language he's got, but he's pushing it here, trying to say much more than his actual, well, not so much his grammar, but his lexicon allows him to. Yes?
And this comes at the time he does the assignment, or at the end as a reflection?
No, this should all be, and I'll explain that. I do 2 interim checks on the portfolios. I'll get to that in just 2 minutes here. So it's in real time. This would have been at that point in the semester, right? So he's showing bits and pieces from what he's done. These are still portfolio exercises. There we go. The products I didn't know, as he said from the website, products I don't know. He got his knowledge, his Russian went there, so he didn't know frozen foods, he didn't know dietary or diabetic, foods for diabetics and so forth. So you can see this is a long file. I'm going to just kind of zip through it just so you can see. This is a long, long file. This is what the whole portfolio would look like. There's colors, different bits, what I want to wear, nationalities, right? So that's one other type, is to do it in the form of a PDF file. Other students did them. So I'll try breaks. Come on. There we go. In electronic form. They created their own blog sites or their own websites. So here's his portfolio. This is just done in blogs in web space at UT. Portfolio, and I love this. So there, he just posted this. Obviously, we were giving this talk by Ilya Yashin was coming, and I love that his entry here is, I'm going. He said, "Ya paidu," I will go to this talk. So he posts the talk, there it is. So that's a lot of fluff, fluff, fluff. But then here we go. This is a little bit more interesting. He's posting money from 2004, Russian money from 2004. He just takes offline, but then he comments on it at the beginning. So he names them out: 10 rubles, 50 rubles, 100 rubles, 50, and 1,000 rubles, and so forth. So a little bit of language use here. This is, let me see what this is. It's a blog site he went to that says how to pass a test in Russian. And he says, my favorite rule of how to pass a test was number 5. And so he copies it down and then translates it. So he did a little bit of translation there. Again, this is up to them. So I don't ever say you have to translate, you don't have to translate. That's it. So that's a blog site's the other one. Other students will go purely creative. So one entry in this woman's was put on a flash drive. I have to show this only because I won't show the whole thing since it's 5 minutes long, 5.5 minutes, but it's quite impressive. So this student had relatively limited Russian, but was a heritage speaker, but from one of the old Soviet republics. So there were a lot of interesting features here. So the Russian she knew, even from her parents' side, wasn't really what one would call, right, dictionary, textbook Russian, because it was actually from Kazakh parents who had immigrated. And so there were a lot of issues going here, and she really struggled in first year Russian. But at the end of the first semester, she said, I really feel like I can do more than I'm showing that I can do. So that's what the portfolio is for. Show me what you can do. And so one of the things she did, she says, I can draw really well. And I said, well, that has very little to do with your Russian. She said, well, let me try. And she submitted this. I'll just play a little bit of it. What she did was she memorized a Pushkin poem, one of the great Russian poets, and she does this piece where she illustrates the Pushkin poem while she recites it. So take a look at a little piece of this, because I thought it was quite creative. This is Pushkin's poem that means I walk along noisy streets, by Alexander Pushkin. So she begins the drawing.
What is she saying?
So she's reciting the poem. This is Pushkin's poem about, this is one of Pushkin's more melancholy poems about walking along these noisy streets, and he thinks about his years passing by. Pushkin, of course, being one of those romantic era poets like Byron and all, who dies very, very young in his life, but does some of the most capital R romantic poems ever. And this is actually really an interesting case. So what do we have here? And this kind of moves us into the section on assessments a little bit, because you look at it, it's quite beautiful. It's 5 minutes, it's this gorgeous work, and the scroll never stops, right? The story keeps going and keeps going. She does this amazing, it's going to change in color soon, which is quite remarkable too. So she continues with the poem. Now, I was very moved by it because it's beautiful, and the recitation, which she assured me was by memory, because she came into my office and said I can just recite the poem, and she did. So she had memorized the poem. But where now, oh great pedagogues that we are sitting here, where does memorized speech fall in proficiency? Even a beautiful Pushkin poem, where does memorized speech fall? Novice. Novice. I could even go novice plus, because at least there's tough pronunciation, which she does beautifully. So it's basically, right, 0 plus. This was still like early in the course that memorized speech would fall. So one is torn on the one side, and that's where I'm getting into now assessment. What does one do with this, where the student hasn't actually, the production is mostly graphic, beautiful drawings, but I can't assess her drawing, or can I? Right, go for it.
It's interpretation.
Yes.
This is comprehension.
Yes.
In a very, I think, beautiful and sophisticated way.
It's stunning, actually. It really says that the firebirds that she's about to draw are going to go into color in a little bit, with green and red and stuff. It's quite pretty when she goes on with this. And that's it. So I've offered you a sample rubric here. This is not like swallow this whole, but something to think about and obviously modify for your own needs. You'll see one of the things that I put this out of 100 points for which they'll receive 20. Yes, ma'am.
This is maybe a silly question, no? But the drawing, we said it's interpretation or comprehension,
Right.
Can be assessed that way. That translations can be super available on the internet, so I would have problems, basically.
Yeah.
I understand it needs.
No. It's quite good. I would recognize frequently in the early, and I'll show you about doing interim assessments, Google Translate.
Oh, no.
And I can spot it in a second.
Yeah.
I can spot it in a second, right? We all can,
Yeah.
right? You know exactly when it's been dumped into
Yeah.
And the same thing kind of goes here. And yet, honestly, the sense was, of course, she could have looked at an English translation. What I loved about this piece is English is her third language.
Okay.
So I'd be surprised, honestly, anything other than this was Russian, kind of going through, trying to figure out what the best interpretation would be.
So, but this is a special case then,
Yes, yes, that's why I'm showing it.
I agree.
No, I'm absolutely showing this as a special
What happens
case.
if it's an American, Native American, translations are available on the internet, so I'm not sure if I could consider it,
I have to admit that for the portfolio, with the exception of Google Translate, which is so easy to recognize, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
The benefit of the doubt.
I absolutely
okay.
do, because they know what's at stake for them. But ultimately, at the end of the course, they're going to get an oral proficiency interview. So basically, if they're not progressing themselves, if they're not moving themselves forward, it's to their own detriment. Very rarely do the students, by the way, this may be too generalized, but I have not seen very many students who will take the intensive classes in anything, whether it's Arabic or Hebrew or whatever, who are looking for the easy way out.
Yeah.
They're not looking to do, let me find the translation online and go with that.
Yeah.
Rarely. That's a pretty, yeah.
Okay, but I agree. This is a fantastic interpretation.
Well, and what I said is that she was not the strongest student, so this was one way she could show that she was getting something out of the course. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I would just think that on the rubric, you would give her points for interacting with the language
Yes.
in an innovative way and integrating technology.
And I'm going to add one more thing. If you looked at the rubric, look at the very bottom, creativity.
Yeah.
That's where and this is kind of my way of the balance, right?
Yes.
To say, okay, she didn't create a whole lot of new language in the sense of orally, right? She didn't speak fresh, new, my own creation Russian. So she would lose certain points there, but where could I give them exactly in those characteristics?
She interpreted
She
language.
exactly.
She didn't produce, but she
interpreted,
interpreted language,
exactly.
and she reflected it in the form of an image.
It-
Which is, I mean,
Yeah, you don't need to convince me of this. I scored this actually very high, right? But I scored this piece very high because again, you want, and especially first semester, right? This is the semester that they're decide whether they're going to continue on into the second half of intensive. 100% of the students in this class did, which was very odd from my experience. Had everyone continue into the second half of the course. But no, the rubric allows you to take piece by piece and say, here's where you excelled, and here's where it'd be great if you could, do some more work. Maybe next time, try one where you're going to produce something orally for us. Go out on a limb. Yes, sir, please.
So, I guess a couple of questions.
Yes.
Laying aside the other question that could be asked here of how do we know that's actually her drawing? Which is why you want to keep this very low stakes, because the whole evidentiary aspect and validation of whether they use the dictionary, whether they use the translation,
Right.
whether it's for her,
Right.
are there. But just setting that aside for a minute, the issue, I noticed that your rubric isn't connected directly to proficiency levels and
Right.
proficiency descriptors.
Right.
So
Right.
when you have the students creating their own tasks,
Right.
and the rubric that they may have access to is not connected to a proficiency framework and
Right.
and a scale,
Right.
how do they know, and I think this becomes even perhaps more relevant to the question as they progress in proficiency, how do they know, first of all, and how do you know that they are going to select, if you're waiting until mid-semester and then end semester, that you're not going to wind up with a portfolio that only provides evidence
Got three
of
answers.
0+ ability.
Got it, perfect. One, my tasks are tied to the proficiency guidelines.
Right.
So they're trying to match these up. They know where they are in the class because they're watching my tasks that I've been posting every week, 3, 4, 5 tasks a week, and they are matched to the proficiency guidelines. That's one. Two, they know that that's the overall orientation of the course because they have to do an OPI at the end of the semester. Three, and this is the best, is the next page, is that I give them interim feedback twice before they turn in the final product. So they don't rely exclusively to the very end and suddenly go, oh gosh, I didn't realize you wanted me to be paying attention to proficiency, because I will comment on that. To say, so far, the tasks that the items that you've had in, this is twice during the year. As I said, I do one in first semester, so one in October and one in November, and then they turn them in at the beginning of December for final grading with the rubric. But here I'll just give a little paragraph back to them where I would say, try more to show me what you can do, and I would say tasks such as 1, 2, 3, 4, as I have here. So they get 3 kind of good reminders that they need to be attending to proficiency, even if the rubrics are trying to be much more holistic. Rather, because I don't want the rubrics to come out to be a checkbox to say, but I did that. You should give me 100 points, because it's not that. It is much more holistic, so that things like this, and yeah, she would have had to gone pretty far, because I recognize her hands. For it not to be her, she'd have to gone pretty far for me not to recognize her, and a couple of times you see the side of her face. So it's her. And she brought it, she brings in the project to me too at the end of the course and so forth. So yeah, so I don't worry so much about the authenticity of the piece, but I do very much want to attend precisely what your concern is here, that there's something here that is proficiency oriented. Now, where would it be? It would be on the interpretive side. Can you understand Russian poetry? Can you show someone else what the poem means? Right, that kind of thing. So it does have a proficiency orientation, though it's one that I would not necessarily cover in class. So that's why I like the portfolio exercises. Yes, ma'am.
This is a very technical question. And interim report assessments, do they have a numeric value? Like, are they graded, and are they average?
Yeah, they get check plus minus. So that's all. That's all. No, that's all they get.
So you grade the final.
The final
Okay.
product. So this is what I like to just call a progress report.
Yeah, exactly. Just to make sure that they work consistently
Right.
during the semester.
So check means all's well. Check minus means some improvement needed. Check plus means this is terrific, keep up the good work.
Okay, great.
And that's kind of where it is. And I do give, as you see, a few sentences that kind of tell them what I really liked or where I think they could improve. And if indeed proficiency is not being addressed, if they're not showing me in the portfolio that they can do stuff with the language, that gets put into this little written report too. Yes, ma'am, please. Actually, and we're rolling perfectly. This is exactly rolling into questions, so go for it.
Have you talked with anyone who has had to grade them through the semester? Because there's no way I'm going to do 125 portfolios in one day, which is about what I've got to grade.
Yeah.
So you're doing these checks, would it
Yeah.
make sense to say, so many have to be done at this point, and I have time for
Yes.
so many at this point?
Well, that's kind of
and
what these
then
interim
build-
checks are. Right, the interim
Yeah.
checks is to let me have a look first, so that when I get the thing at the end, I'm really not seeing it all for the first time. I'm only really seeing a third of it for the first time at worst case scenario.
So you don't
Most-
go back and grade? the
I'm not going to
first part?
regrade every, no. So I'm really looking each time, it's, so that at the end it's summative. At the end, I'm looking at, okay, you went from check minus to check, and this is now really, really good. So overall, this is much better, right? The final product is the holistically graded, yeah. You're quite right, by the way. One thing I can, in my kind of looking over to Nick, because I know what he's going to be talking about this afternoon, is where does the teacher's role come into this? Well, it's very heavy. Producing these items that I was showing you, right? Producing the items, suggesting material to the students, turning it around to them twice during the semester, or maybe even once during the semester. Still a lot of work when you've got, as you said, several classes of 30 each, right? Which I know high school teachers do. To that extent, one can come up with a couple of suggestions. One is going to be what Nick is going to propose in the afternoon, which is electronic portfolios that will have online assessment ongoing. Another is, I have used this, the second year I did it, was for one of the interim assessments, I had the students do peer assessment for one of them, was to do peer assessment. And that actually was terrific, because they had to sit at a table like this. Everyone kind of did these, handed to the person next to you, and they literally discussed among them who did what kind of activities were being looked at, and so forth. It turned out to be a really useful use of my class time for that the half a session that I did. Well, yeah.
Two questions.
Sure, go for it,
The
please.
first one is about poetry, what you mentioned about poetry. Yeah,
Yes.
I agree, for memorized stuff. But what about the poetry? Poetry sometimes demonstrates some level of abstraction.
Yes.
The vocabulary that is used is beyond the level of the novice or the intermediate level. So how do we control that? And you mentioned she is a heritage.
Yes.
So this is the first one. The other one, the portfolio is a wonderful thing. The question is, do you feel that if she shares this work with other students who are not heritage, will they be able to relate to it? And the question, how can we make these products available to the other students for sharing? So it's not something just between the student and the teacher.
Let me start with the last one, because that's crucial, and actually that's literally now the last bit here, the last page of the handout, which is everything the students that we do, as I say, I think here are the two requirements that I give for them: 12 portfolio items, 6 from the Blackboard side, at least 6 of their own, and I tell them how it's going to be graded, and I show them what the proficiency target is. Again, the student knows all of this ahead of time, right? Proficiency target here is low, intermediate, low at the end of the first semester. Intermediate, mid to intermediate, high for the second semester is what we shoot for, right? And so it tells what we're going for. All of the materials, even if it's in the form of these, which gets scanned, everything goes up on our Blackboard site, so that students from second semester can see everything that was done in first semester by every student. And then students, either during the summer or the following year, see what was done in the second semester. Everything is put up because it's terrific stuff. And as you say, so much of it is a teachable moment, right? Like, I used that video of that. We had done some Pushkin in my class, a different poem, and I put that one up just because a lot of students had said they loved the Pushkin and wanted to do more. So I said, here you go. And we got the text. They looked at it, they heard it, they listened, they did the kind of go around, everyone goes around, reads a little bit, trying to work on pronunciation. Even at the end of the course, you're still working on pronunciation, obviously, so it turned out to be very, very useful. Yeah. And then the other one, remind me. Those were the two. Yeah. Vince, no, sorry. Yes, ma'am, go.
Okay.
And I'll come back around here, promise.
So my question is, what do students say about this kind of activity? because I had conflicting,
Mine was universal.
yeah,
They loved it.
yeah.
They loved it. In the intensive class, I have to admit, and Mahmoud can speak to this better than I can because he, in a sense, invented it, reinvented it, I should say, for the University of Texas. And now a number of our languages, including French now, has taken this up, Italian has taken this up at UT, to try this 6 hours a week for 2 semesters model. That said, how do I put this without putting too fine a point? The intensive courses are intense. There is very little downtime during the 50 minutes or 75 minutes of class. Almost no downtime. The students are producing at a rate that we simply don't do in our normal classes. The portfolio is reflective time. And they love the fact that they can still be doing something with the language, but down, on their own pace.
Yes.
And they can go back and look at it several times and listen to it as often as they need. They like this kind of freedom of not having, having us in their face and saying, produce, produce, produce.
Yes.
Speak, 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 sit, 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 watch, 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 talk, talk, watch, talk, back and forth. Because it is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so the students, I have to admit, maybe this is not the best control group, because when I say, so what do you think? How do you, this was in my final course evaluation that I did for them. What did you think of the portfolios? Loved it. Favorite part, this is where I really feel I could show off to you what I could do in the language. And students saying things like, okay, there would be times when I just felt you thought I was an idiot, where you thought I was stupid because I couldn't say, I couldn't speak as quickly as you wanted me to in class. But here I could show off that I could do stuff in the language. I could show you. So it was pretty uniform that they did like it. Now, there's one question here, and then I'll cut over here. Yeah? Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
I would just wonder if you're scanning it and putting it all online, why don't you just do it all electronic instead of on
Because some of
paper?
the students really want that.
Yeah.
They
On
want the
paper?
paper copy. That's how they want to put it up. And it's still protected. It's all, I'm very conscious of FERPA at UT, and so it's all on the Blackboard site. So it's still only accessed by the students themselves. But they can put it in any format that they want. And it's interesting, your point though, well taken, that even in these 3 short years, the movement has definitely been toward the electronic format. They prefer it, clearly. The first notion, though, for students like the scrapbooking types was they want to show the pretty pictures. And that's
You
okay.
can still put that, I mean.
Oh, and I do.
We do ours electronically.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. There are different ways they can.
Pictures and
Yeah.
put photos.
I think this is purely a matter of how comfortable the individual student feels with the technology. I think that's all it is. You're absolutely right, though. And definitely we're moving in the direction of the technology. Yes, ma'am, go for it, and then we'll come back.
My question is, do you have any suggestions to bring out, like, teenagers, you ask them to sit and evaluate somebody's
Yeah.
portfolio?
Yes.
And say, this is nice, and this is nice, and they don't give them constructive criticism. I tried this last year in my classroom, but I also included myself as one of them on a one-on-one after
Yep.
they got their feedback from their peers. And there really wasn't any constructive criticism.
Did you give them a rubric that they had to fill?
Yes, they had a rubric.
Because that to me was a game changer for me. If you just sit them around and say, tell your buddy what you think about her portfolio, it's usually, oh, I liked it, oh, pretty, oh, that's nice, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But if you
Well,
say,
there was a-
how many points do you get for this, that, look at the language, look at the use of photograph, look at the use of technology if it's on an e-piece, right? Because they all have their laptops with them, so they can look online. And they got pretty, I have to admit, they were fierce. They were critical.
Mine worked.
And I'm wondering, what was the age?
14.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily simply that. Maybe, again, not having worked with 14-year-olds, but wondering if it might not be the specificity of the rubrics.
Oh, no,
They're real
There
specific.
was a very detailed rubric.
Okay.
They had 3 of them that they had to look for.
Okay.
Stuff and I broke down.
And do you feel maybe they were just being cursory in the sense of just wanting to say, give everybody an A, so to speak?
No, I think it was more like I don't want to give anybody small.
Ah, that's nice to hear, actually.
If there's something they don't understand, was there any part you didn't understand? Was there any part you think
Oh, yeah.
they could clarify?
Right,
So you
right.
can
Something-
imagine this.
I keep thinking it's something
Something like
about the
that.
task that they needed to be performing. Yeah, that's a very good question, though. Yes, sir, no, come back around here.
I could just back that social issue, that they don't want to hurt
Yeah.
anybody's feelings. So I would suggest setting it up in a context, whether it's electronic or non-electronic, where they have the opportunity to provide the feedback let's say you've got a part of your class period dedicated to handing out things,
No, that's
and
possible.
you're passing it around.
Yeah.
And I get, as a student, I get somebody's work, and I have the rubric, and I have a task to make some kind of specific recommendation, something I would do differently,
Sure.
etc. But I'm not signing it, number one, and I'm not doing it in front of the rest of the group, number two. And then I make a comment, and then I pass it on. It's anonymous and it's individual, even though it's all being done at the same time.
I think that's a good, as you say, a psychological underpinning you're pulling out. I also, as I said, believe me, I can't tell you how buoyed I am to hear that at 14 or 15, whenever it is, that they don't want to hurt each other's feelings, because at 18, that's the least of their concerns. Seriously. I mean, I think it is a difference in the Facebook generation, where sometimes the things that they will say to each other gut me. I can't believe they're saying this to a colleague, and then they say to each other, oh, because they, apologize for what you just said, and just, I'm okay, no, I'm good, that's fine, you didn't hurt me. What,
Well, I know,
did it bother you?
I
I'm lying in a puddle on the floor. Yeah, so I'm happy to hear if they're still concerned about each other's feelings. I'm wondering what happens between 14 and 18.
Well, we can get into Facebook, and some of them haven't even been on it yet. So let it, so.
It's hard to
that's
imagine
what-
that wonderful, see, I may trade places with you at some point, I want to see what that's for.
So what
Yes, sir,
number
come here, then we'll go back to this.
A couple of questions.
Please.
The first one is, just clarifying, the fourth point on the rubrics.
Yes,
you
please.
Proficiency target, this is what you give them. You say ACTFL, and you get low, and that's what you tell them? And so they have to be familiar with it.
Show me where you are again.
Actual, page 7.
Oh, okay,
And,
yes.
And so you have the semester 1 rubric, semester
Yeah,
2.
yes, and those aren't the rubric. Those aren't the rubrics. The rubrics are on page 5. So I have the page number, it's between 6 and 4. On page 5, those are the rubrics the students get. This is on the syllabus that tell them it says when you will do a portfolio, and the portfolio will be this. This is what you do, but that's not, the rubrics are these guys over here.
Right, so, but this is the part that I wanted to ask.
Right, please, okay.
When you tell the students, this is what I'm looking for.
Right.
That fourth point, you just basically, that's all you tell them, ACTFL?
No, they know the reference that the one at the very beginning, and kind of do the introduction to how the course is being done, is the intensity and so forth. I actually put up, I think it's very good to go full frontal with the proficiency guidelines. And I put up the infamous cone, and I show them what a fully educated native speaker can do, and I show them what they'll probably be able to do at the end of the course. And there's usually a massive groan. The notion of getting to a 1+ being like, really, that's it? That little thing at the bottom when there's all this? And yet that's precisely what I want them to know, is what there is, how much growth that really is, what that indicates. And what they'll then have, there are two things, and Nick, I think, is going to talk about this in the afternoon. They do, at the beginning, at the end, we use the ILR, the Interagency Language Roundtable, can do rubrics. And they're all 4 skills, about 15 pages each. Not that they ever get much past page 4, but they're about 15 pages each of what can you do with the language. And of course, at the beginning, they're like at the they're zeros. 0 plus at best, if they know some. And by the end of the course, they can get to page 3, 4, and I can order in a restaurant, I can get a cab, I can do that, I can introduce myself, I can introduce a third person, I can do all that. So they suddenly start now to feel better. This is a reminder that we want them to get to that bit of the cone, right, to down here, even though, yes, there is all that.
Okay.
But what's cool about it, too, is they start, to their credit, becoming a little bit proficiency savvy without becoming proficiency obsessed. They do start to look at performance. When we show the clips, this goes back to Vince's comment, when they see things like mitigative speech, of what is involved in speaking at a 4+ or 5 level, at a superior distinguished level. What does that entail? And I jokingly will tell them, and maybe I'm being a little bit harsh on, but I will tell them, you hit that level, and think about it in English, because not all native speakers of any language are 4s and 5s, or superior distinguished speakers, not all of us are. When you can talk about what is the meaning of life and why it is so in the target language, you're there. You're there. You're at that level now. Now you're getting toward the top. When you can handle a philosophical point and defend its, in the Platonian term, its existence, congratulations, you're now a fully educated native speaker. And they realize how far one has to go in your native language to get there. that it's just a huge amount. That cone, whoever, I think this is Party, that came up with that cone, that design is perfect of how knowledge piles up on itself. It's not linear. It's not, here, here, here. It's not. It's this compilation of stuff. So I thank you for bringing that up, because the student needs to be aware of how much that little 1+ means. To be at an intermediate plus is a lot. You can do a lot with the language, and the can-do exercises show them what they can do. Yeah.
The second question
Please.
is, I see how it works with accelerated students or classes, and with people that are choosing this particular language and in this intensity because they really want to master this.
Right.
How about for the rest of us who are stuck with Spanish, and that's the one that students have to just take, so it's
No one is stuck with Spanish. Spanish is our lifeline. Spanish is all that's going to be left in 2020. That's all. Some of us in Russian and Arabic are kind of worried that there's only going to be Spanish and all the rest of
but
us.
that's okay.
No, understood.
But
No, good, extremely good point. And thank you. Actually, I should have probably prefaced some remarks about that. I think we came up with the necessity for portfolios because of the intensive format. I think you're right. However, Nick, I know is going to reinforce this because he's now using his in a normally paced class. I think moreover, especially in our classes that are not the super, the students who are saying, I really want this intensive stuff in 1 year, who are not the hyper-motivated, the extraordinary students, but our usual students, the students we normally get in everything from Latin to Spanish to French and Italian to German to Arabic to Russian to Chinese. That whole gamut will benefit from this. How you present them will have to be tweaked, right? Maybe you don't want to do 6 and 6 items. Maybe you say 5 items total, something like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be an intensive format to portfolios, but using them nonetheless to be able to get at that stuff that they can produce on their own that they may not produce in class. I just have found, actually, once we went at UT, I was spoiled, I'm afraid. Most of our Russian classes from most of the 90s, ideally would have between 12 and 15 in a class. And it was terrific. You could spend so much time with the individual. I was stunned, actually, at how much you can do in a class when there's 12 students in it. And then suddenly, to deal with 25, more, twice the students, and how hard it was to get even a few minutes of speech out of each student. Physically, literally, right? Even if I don't say anything and make each one speak, I might get 2 minutes, 3 minutes out of each student. That said, I realized I needed to come up with other ways of getting them to produce. And portfolios seemed like a no-brainer to me, just because it was like, great, go home, and rather than just do homework, yes, of course you need to learn the cases, of course you need to know the plurals, you need to know the tenses, of course, show me what else you can do. Show me what you want to do rather than what I'm telling you to do. Yeah. So I think, I would love to start now, and I know Nick is very, very much part of this in his dissertation research, is collecting even anecdotal data from different institutions, different teachers with different students. What's going on out there with portfolios? Is anyone else trying them? Who's using them? I love hearing, I'm hearing back there, I've been using them and so forth. I want to hear. And the results, how have you found them? What do you do? What rubrics do you use and so forth? I think we're going to come up with almost a quasi-science with this eventually. Yes, ma'am, please.
I was just going to make a comment.
Yes, please.
This gentleman's comment. I think that we as Spanish language teachers have a little bit more of an advantage because we're living in the southwest part of the United States where Spanish is the most predominant minority language. So we have the opportunity to push foreign language skills in their marketing capacity and allow students to find avenues to be bilingual and find bilingual careers. That's one point. And then the other point is that no matter what level, I've sat in, I'm a high school teacher, I've taught K through 12, I've never taught college, but I sat in recently on a UT professor foreign language class, and I was very surprised to find out that she didn't do anything different than I do in my classroom. She used a visual to introduce a theme, she did some probing questions, she grouped the kids in cooperative groups, she gave them some critical thinking questions after the video clip, and she walked around and monitored and listened to their dialogue within each other. And that's not any different than what I do as a high school teacher. And to me, the portfolio is the culmination of what you learn at the end of the year, and I may be interpreting it for the way I want to see it. But I'm going to do rote learning, and I'm going to do participation grades, and I'm going to monitor for my kids and walk around and see how well they take in the process. Because to me, the process of putting together the portfolio is equally as important as the end result. The kids, they're teenagers. I deal with 16, 17-year-olds, but the only difference is in a 19-year-old, I guess in a university, and maybe I don't know, I'm naive, but they should be a little bit more mature. I noticed that the kids were using their cell phones a lot less in the college classroom than they were in my classroom. The teachers didn't have to babysit that aspect of the teaching, so maybe they are a little bit more mature by the time they get to college. But they still need to learn critical thinking skills. They need to learn how to beat the system. They need to learn how to learn how to confront their fears and say, I can do this. And we're educators. We're teaching them to make it to adulthood in one piece. It's not just about the language or the instruction.
So what part of the going to the website and facing your fears doesn't fulfill that? Because I think that's exactly what we're doing.
That's why it's important in anything we teach.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. And please, especially for those who want to come visit, all of our classes, you know, are open to the public. We're a public university. Come in. Politely, it's better if you ask the professor. But you can just walk in. We're by law, you can just walk in. Come see a variety. Because I promise you, there are three things I would say about this. One, none two of our instructors teach exactly alike, even in the same language. Two, no two languages of ours are taught exactly alike. And three, our intensive courses are simply unique in how they're taught. And I would really encourage any of you, even if it's not in your language, if you don't do Arabic or Russian or Italian or French, come see one of our intensive courses just to see how they're done, because it changed my life. And I thought I'd seen everything in the Soviet Union in the 1980s. Of what they did to students learning a foreign language, literally. I mean, I really thought I'd seen it all. Watching Mahmoud teach was one of the most undoing experience of my life. It really just kind of undid all my expectations about what I thought I'd been doing for the previous 30 years in a classroom. And I wouldn't go back now for anything. And I'm not saying that in a proselytizing way, but rather in we as educators are some of the best learners, I hope, right? That boy, did I learn a lot. So please, this is to anybody, everybody, come visit, come look at what we do here. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any movement here to institutionalize or require portfolios in any one language or across languages, or is this something that's only done in intensive? And is it a requirement for intensive, or do you do other formats in your intensive?
It's definitely, it in some form is required for our intensives in Russian. There's a portfolio quotient in all of our courses, in all of our Russian courses. I'm pretty sure, so I'm kind of going through the languages that teach portfolios are done in all of the intensive groups, but they are equally now making a lot of headway in our other languages, across languages. I know some of our other Germanic languages use them now, Norwegian, Swedish, Danish, and Dutch have used portfolios in them. German has used them in its summer program, I know. So I think it's kind of that classic thing of it's now been around long enough that it's finally starting to make some headway in our programs. Yeah. Yes, ma'am, please.
So, this assessment on page 5.
Yes.
Did I understand correctly, you said this was only for the first semester, and that you start doing different programs?
Yes. In the second, thank you for, I actually didn't cover that. In the second semester, the reason it shifts, as you can tell from, if you go to the last page, page 7, that in semester 2, more portfolio exercises are required, more items are required, but only 5 come from the Blackboard site. It's slightly less. Why? Second semester, let me go back. First semester in the intensive class, there's an extraordinary emphasis on listening comprehension and production that follows the listening comprehension. We try to get listening and speaking to kind of mirror each other in development. In the second semester, contrary to what we normally do in our regular courses, that's where a lot more focus is placed on reading for us. So, over the winter break, I ask students who are continuing to, I give them a Russian website again, give them the address, and I ask them to spend no more than $10, but to pick of their choosing, on their interests, a book. Any kind of book. preferably, well, not a picture book, right? A book with words. A classically trained book, right? A book on their subject. It can be from classical literature, it can be a how-to, it can be whatever they like. And I will tell you what we pick in a minute. And that's going to become their home reading, their house reading, as it were, for the next semester. And there's no assignment that says, because the books are all so different, you need to get through the entire book. It's simply read. And every week, read more in your book. And every week, for your portfolio, write a paragraph about the reading. It can be summative, but it needs to have a bit of analysis. What was tough about it? Right, list out the words that you just can't get down, that you've had to look up over and over. You know, be both introspective and extrospective about it. So really kind of talk about the reading. So that becomes a large part, a quotient of the portfolio in the second semester. So there's a small number of the tasks they're used to doing from first semester, a large amount of their reading kind of diary, if you will. At the very end, by the way, I may have some of these here, people wanted to see them over lunch or something. They also have to do, and I record these, kind of a public book report, because part of it is presentational skills. I want them with a 4x6 index card, no more than that, of notes. They have to report on their book to the entire class and take questions in Russian, entirely. So that's kind of their kind of it's funny because it doesn't quite fit fully into the actual guidelines. It's making, kind of standing up and saying, now I'm going to tell you about this and all, because it's a different kind of can-do. But I want them to get that feeling that now, after literally 30 weeks of Russian, they can stand up in front. They've now gotten through enough of a part of a book in the original language. They can talk about it in the language and ask their questions about it in the language, and they do. And they do. So that's it. Yeah, Mark, go for it.
How much time do you expect them to spend, per week? I mean, I see that you have like 15 entries or 12.
Yeah.
So basically, this is roughly like once a week.
Exactly.
How much time per week do you expect them to work? I mean, it's average.
On average, given that they spend 6 hours a week in class, the expectation out of class is approximately 3 times that amount. It's between 18 and 25 hours, depending on how good they are, to be blunt, how proficient they are, how well they can get into it, that they spend out of class. Out of that time, because I'm not going to, these are not additional hours,
no.
But out of that particular time, I expect they'll probably spend between 4 and 5 hours of that time on the portfolio.
There is other
a week.
Homework.
Of course.
Yeah.
The remaining, what is that going to be? The remaining 12 hours to 13 hours is regular homework. There's reading assignments. There's online exercises that they're doing as well for our courses. Please, yes, sir.
What percentage of the final grade is the regular homework? If the portfolios are 20-25%?
Usually, I try usually to match those up. So they tend to be about the same, so it's 20-20 or 25-25 for the 2 halves. Then there's exams, and there's their oral production, OPI at the end.
So almost half of the final grade is based off of
It's based on work
portfolio
that you've done outside of class. Absolutely. Absolutely. For us, yes, because actually they're spending more time, we hope, out of class working on the language than in class. Yes, ma'am, please.
That reflection on the novel or the book they're
Yes.
reading is in English?
No. It's got to be in Russian.
It has to be in Russian.
It's in Russian. It's in the language. Absolutely. And again, I+1. So we tell them, look, I'm not trying to tie your hands. Write what you can write. And if you get to that point where you're, and what they'll try to do, and I love this is a great OPI strategy, or a proficiency interview strategy, is you find yourself not being able to talk about the theme you've been given on the little card. How do you talk your way around it? My favorite OPI game, my grad students know this, got told this story 1,000 times when I was at the Foreign Service Institute and was given the little card, was you're traveling by yourself in a car across Siberia to get to your next post, and your car gets a flat tire. Describe now how you change the tire.
Oh.
And I thought about this because I thought, okay, how do I say jack? How do I say spare? How do I started thinking, how do I do all this? Okay, I can. And then I thought, and so I started speaking. I've never changed a tire in my life, so I wouldn't know what to do. And the examiner looked at me and said, imagine what you do. Can't imagine, because I've never changed a tire in my life. And she had to move on because I kind of said, I have no idea how to change a spare tire. And that is exactly what we want in our OPIs. It's not that, she had to try something else to tell. She asked me how to make a hamburger. So, right, different skill set. But the notion, can a student talk her way out of a situation? So as they write up the thing, one student chose, it was my only one that I kind of waffled on, was her reading, because she really was like, I don't like. What do you like? I like Twilight. I wanted to die 1,000 deaths. I said, fine, get it in Russian. She goes, well, I've read it in English. I said, fine, it's different in Russian. It's different. Get it in Russian. Write it up in Russian. So it was very interesting precisely because she knew the story in English, she actually got to where she could write pretty well on it. Her little paragraphs got better and better in Russian, that she could talk about it. So I often tell students, when you get to that part that you can't describe, what happened in the book, try to write your way around the situation. Describe then the situation that's around it. You don't know the word for backpacking, so the person writes, walking with a heavy sack. That's what the student wrote. The person was backpacking through whatever, I can't remember where, she wrote he was walking with a heavy sumka, so he said, with a heavy bag. That was backpacking. And that works, right? Because we want them to use what they can use. Yeah. Just hand that here again. How are we doing? Anyone else? Kara, go for it. Give us, as they say, sing us out of this one.
In terms of the websites and things of that nature and the initial portfolio activities, I can imagine the kinds of sites you'd be looking for with pictures and with the proper language. Any suggestions for finding them versus just trial and error? I think it would take a long time to compile.
Actually, I was going to say, thank you for asking that, because I should have said, I hope it looked like I spent a lot of time building up that repertoire of 28 sites. It actually is very quick. I would do them on Monday morning or Sunday night before the Monday class for the entire week. And it takes me about, and I was surprised actually, I'd kind of given myself it for Sunday night, and it's going to take me a while to write this. It takes about 15 minutes to do one.
It's 12 on the clock.
I'm aware. I'm finishing up. Actually, all I would be in a .ru search, would be to search for, like the one on the grocery store. Would put it in Russian grocery stores, and I'd get a series of sites. I'd click on them. It took me literally click, now don't like it, click, oh, it was okay, click, oh, that's perfect. It was click, 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 this is perfect. I'd make an attachment and then write a task based on that. Again, going back to based on the proficiency skill that I'm trying to shoot for that week. Okay, they only know cognate, so it's going to be a cognate exercise. They don't know verbs of motion yet, so we'll hold off on that. It will be about description. Now they know verbs of motion. It's going to be describe the trip. Tell me how you get there, right? And so, yeah, real easy to do. I was surprised how maintenance is a little bit challenging. You need to keep checking to make sure the sites are good, right? Because they often, some just go down. In fact, I'd forgotten to check one of these today, and I was kind of worried that if I clicked on it, it might not work, but there they are. They're all still good. Those have been up now for 3 years. Yeah. So, you've all been delightfully patient in all of this. Food is waiting. Betsy, where are we around the corner?
We're just around the corner, just on the other side of those curtains there.
So literally just make a hook to the left.